The morning sun glints off the chrome of a black Mercedes when a small figure appears. Navy blue school uniform crisp but showing wear at the collar. White and gray sneakers scuffed from playground battles. Dark blue backpack clutched against his small frame like armor. He stands beside the car, shoulders squared despite the trembling in his legs. Eyes searching, terrified but determined. He stops in front of him. The man his mother begged him never to speak to. The man with geometric tattoos crawling up his neck like dark warnings. The man whose name makes even seasoned detectives choose their words carefully. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's go back to hours before where it all started. A Mafia boss, Ruggero Bellucci, was adjusting his silver watch when the boy stepped into his path. "Mr. Bellucci, sir," he whispered, his voice shaking but refusing to break. "Can you please walk me to school today? I don't feel safe anymore." His entire security team froze. His driver's hand stopped mid-reach for the passenger door. Even the groundskeeper, pressure washing the fountain 50 feet away, seemed to forget how to breathe. No one approached Ruggero Bellucci like this. People asked him for favors they'd spend decades repaying, for mercy for transgressions that usually ended in unmarked graves, for protection that required blood oaths and absolute loyalty. But never this. Never such raw, simple protection. Never from a child who was supposed to remain invisible. He knelt slowly, his tattooed hands resting on his knees, his voice low and measured. "Why aren't you safe, little one?" The boy, Tito, hesitated, his small fingers gripping his backpack straps until his knuckles went pale. Then he pointed past the estate's wrought iron gates. A man stood watching from beside a rusted white van, hands buried deep in his pockets. A smile that never touched his eyes. A smile that made every instinct in a child's body scream danger. Ruggero's pulse ticked once, sharp and cold, because he recognized that posture, that predatory stillness. Antonio Corelli's operation. A trafficker. A monster who saw children not as innocents, but as merchandise. A man who'd been testing the edges of his territory, probing for weakness. Tito's voice cracked through the silence again, small but impossibly brave. "I just want to get to school today without him following me anymore." Behind them, Aaliyah Longo rushed out, her maid's uniform still being straightened, absolute horror etched across her face. "Tito, I'm so sorry, Mr. Bellucci." He didn't mean to, but Ruggero raised one hand, silencing her without looking away from the little boy. The maid's son, 7 years old, standing where he had no business standing, asking what he had no right to ask. And yet, here he was, choosing courage over invisibility because fear had finally outweighed every survival rule his mother had drilled into him. The Mafia boss stood up, and what he did next, in broad daylight, on the steps of his own estate, in front of his entire crew and the watching predator across the street, would shatter every unspoken rule between employer and employee, between the powerful and the powerless, and ignite a war that would force him to choose between his empire and his soul. Stay with me until the end, because the truth behind that little boy's courage and the boss's decision will leave you breathless. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. His name was Tito Longo, 7 years old, son of Aaliyah Longo, who'd worked as a maid in Ruggero Bellucci's sprawling estate for 4 years. Born into a world where children of service workers learned the art of invisibility, to never make direct eye contact with the boss, to speak only when spoken to never, ever ask the powerful for anything. Where mothers taught their sons that survival meant understanding your place. And that place was always in the shadows, always silent, always grateful for whatever fragments of security came your way. Tito lived with his mother in the modest staff quarters behind the main house, where the imported Italian marble gave way to simple laminate, where the crystal chandeliers became bare LED fixtures, where the world of wealth stopped at a very definite line. Aaliyah worked 14-hour days, keeping that estate immaculate, polishing floors that cost more than 3 years of her salary. arranging fresh flowers in vases worth more than her car, serving guests at dinner parties who never bothered to learn her name. She taught her son 4 rules of survival. Never wander the main house alone, never touch anything that doesn't belong to you, never make eye contact with Mr. Bellucci, and never, under any circumstances, ask him for anything. These weren't suggestions. They were commandments carved into Tito's consciousness from the moment he could understand words. His mother would kneel before him every morning while tying his shoes, her hands steady, her eyes serious, and she would repeat them like a prayer. Rule number 1, baby, what is it? And Tito would answer in his small voice, never wander the main house alone. She would nod, tightening the laces. Rule number 2, he would swallow. Never touch anything that doesn't belong to me. She would smooth his collar. Rule number 3, his eyes would drop to the floor. Never make eye contact with Mr. Bellucci. And then she would cup his face in her hands, lifting his chin so he had no choice but to meet her gaze. And rule number 4, the most important one, he would recite it like scripture. Never, ever ask him for anything. She never explained why. She didn't need to. Even at 7 years old, Tito understood the invisible architecture of power that governed the estate. There were people who gave orders and people who followed them, people who lived in the light and people who existed in the margins. His mother had spent 4 years perfecting the art of being essential but unnoticed, invaluable but invisible. She arrived before dawn to prepare breakfast for a man who rarely acknowledged her presence. She scrubbed toilets in bathrooms larger than their entire living quarters. She ironed shirts that cost more than her monthly salary, handled silk and cashmere and Egyptian cotton with hands roughened by industrial cleaning solutions. And through it all, she taught her son the same survival strategies that had been passed down through generations of service workers. Make yourself useful, but never indispensable. Be present, but never intrusive. Speak when spoken to, smile when appropriate. And above all else, never forget that you exist here by permission, not by right. That permission could be revoked at any moment, for any reason, or for no reason at all. Tito learned these lessons well. When he played in the small courtyard behind the staff quarters, he kept his voice low so it wouldn't carry to the main house. When he walked through the estate to reach the service gate, he kept his eyes down, his footsteps quick and quiet. On the rare occasions when he glimpsed Ruggero Bellucci, usually through windows or across the manicured grounds, he would freeze like a rabbit sensing a predator, waiting until the man passed before continuing on his way. He had seen Mr. Bellucci up close only a handful of times. Once, when he was 5, he had accidentally wandered too far from the staff quarters and found himself near the garage where 3 black Mercedes sat gleaming under overhead lights. Ruggero had been speaking with his driver, his voice low and measured, his tattooed hands gesturing as he gave instructions. Tito had backed away so quickly he'd tripped over his own feet, scraping his knee on the gravel. He'd run back to his mother, breathless and terrified, certain he would be punished. But nothing happened. His mother had simply cleaned his wound, held him close, and whispered the rules again, softer this time, but no less urgent. Another time, when he was 6, he had been walking behind his mother as she carried fresh linens through the east corridor. Ruggero had appeared suddenly from side room, and Aaliyah had immediately pressed herself against the wall, eyes lowered, waiting for him to pass. Tito had mimicked her exactly, making himself as small as possible, barely breathing. Ruggero had walked past them without a word, without even a glance, as if they were simply part of the architecture, no more worthy of acknowledgement than the paintings on the walls or the Persian rugs beneath his feet. That was the way of things. That was the rule of invisibility, and it had kept them safe for 4 years. But for 3 weeks now, Tito had been telling his mother about the man, the one who waited near the school gates every morning, the one who followed him down the 7 blocks between the estate and Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary, the one who knew his name even though Tito had never spoken to him, who smiled at him with eyes that made his stomach twist into knots, who whispered things that made his skin crawl. Tito, I know where you live. Tito, I know which room is yours. Tito. The first time Tito mentioned him, Aaliyah had dismissed it as childhood anxiety. The second time, she had walked him to school herself, scanning the streets but seeing nothing unusual. The third time, when Tito described the white van and the man's exact words, her blood had turned cold. She had gone to the police that same afternoon, standing at the precinct desk for 40 minutes before anyone would take her seriously. The desk sergeant had barely looked up from his paperwork. Kids have active imaginations, ma'am. Probably just someone who works in the neighborhood. When she begged them to at least drive by the school during drop-off, the officer's tone shifted from dismissive to annoyed. We don't have the resources to chase every scared parent's hunch. If something actually happens, come back. If something actually happens. She had gone back a week later, after Tito came home with tears streaming down his face, describing how the man had been waiting at the corner near the school, how he had called Tito's name, how he had known what color shirt Tito was wearing that day. This time, a different officer took the report, typing slowly on a computer with 2 fingers, asking questions that made Aaliyah feel like she was the one being interrogated. Has this man touched your son? Has he threatened him directly? Do you have any photographs? Any witnesses? When she admitted she had none of those things, just a mother's instinct and a child's terror, the officer had closed the file. We'll keep an eye out, ma'am, but without evidence, there's nothing we can do. So Aaliyah did what mothers in her position always did. She became her son's shield. She walked him to school herself every single morning, leaving the estate at 6:45 a.m. to complete the 20-minute journey, then rushing back to begin her duties by 7:30. She held his hand tight. She scanned every parked car. She memorized the faces of every adult who lingered too long near the chain-link fence. And the man in the white van watched them both, smiling, waiting. Then, on a Tuesday morning in late September, Aaliyah woke with a fever of 102 degrees. Her body refused to cooperate. Her head pounded. Her legs wouldn't hold her weight. She called the estate supervisor, explained she needed just one morning to recover, promised she'd be back by noon. Tito stood in their small kitchen, his school uniform on, his backpack ready, his eyes locked on the clock. 7 a.m., 7:10 a.m., 7:15 a.m. The walk took 20 minutes. School started at 7:45. If he left now, he could make it. But the man would be there. The man was always there. His mother's voice came from the bedroom, weak and desperate. "Baby, I'm so sorry. Can you ask Mrs. Chun from the kitchen to walk with you today? Please." But Mrs. Chun had already left for the morning market run. The other staff members had scattered to their duties across the 15-acre property. And Tito knew that if he walked out that gate alone, the man in the white van would finally make his move. He stood in that small kitchen, surrounded by the 4 rules his mother had drilled into him since he could walk, rules that had kept them safe and employed and alive in a world that didn't care if people like them existed. Never wander the main house alone. Never touch anything that doesn't belong to you. Never make eye contact with Mr. Bellucci. Never, ever ask him for anything. And in that moment, with his mother fevered and helpless in the next room, with the clock ticking toward the moment when he would be alone on those streets, Tito made a choice. He walked to the front of the estate, past the service entrance where staff members were supposed to remain, past the kitchen door that led to his world, all the way to the circular driveway where the black Mercedes sat idling, where Ruggero Bellucci stood in his charcoal pinstripe suit, his burgundy shirt catching the early light, his neck tattoos stark against his olive skin. And Tito did the impossible. He broke every single rule his mother had taught him. He wandered where he had no permission to be. He approached what didn't belong to him. He looked directly into the eyes of the most powerful man he'd ever known, and he asked the monster for help. Ruggero Bellucci didn't move. His hazel eyes, sharp and assessing, locked onto the small boy standing before him with trembling legs and clenched fists. The silence stretched between them like a wire-pulled taut, ready to snap. His security team remained frozen, waiting for their boss to speak, to decide, to pass judgment on this unprecedented breach of protocol. When Ruggero finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost gentle, in a way that made it somehow more dangerous. "Why aren't you safe, little one?" Tito's mouth opened, then closed. His throat felt dry. Every instinct his mother had planted in him screamed to run, to apologize, to disappear back into the shadows where he belonged. But the image of the man in the white van, the sound of his voice saying Tito's name like a threat wrapped in kindness, kept his feet planted on the driveway. "There's a man," Tito whispered, his voice barely audible over the fountain's gentle splash. "He's been following me." Ruggiero tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "For how long?" "3 weeks." The words tumbled out now, faster, like a dam breaking. "Every morning. Every single morning. These are when Mama walks me to school. He's in a white van, old and rusty, with a dent on the driver's side door. He parks across from the school gates, near the bodega with the blue awning. And what does this man do?" Ruggiero's tone remained measured, but something shifted in his posture, a subtle tension in his shoulders. Tito's hands tightened on his backpack straps. At first, he just watched, but then he started smiling at me. Not a nice smile, the kind that makes your stomach hurt. And then, he paused, his voice dropping even lower. Then he started saying my name. "Your name?" "Yes, sir." He says it over and over. "Tito, Tito," like he's testing how it sounds. And he knows things. He knows what color shirt I'm wearing before I even leave the estate. He knows which route Mama takes to walk me. He knows. Tito's voice cracked. He knows which window is my bedroom. He told me. He said, "I can see your light at night, Tito. I know which room is yours." One of the security guards, a thick-necked man named Paolo, shifted uncomfortably. Ruggiero raised a hand without looking at him, silencing any interruption. "What else does he say?" Tito's eyes began to well with tears, but he blinked them back furiously. "Big boys don't cry." That's what the kids at school said. Big boys don't cry, and they definitely don't run to adults for help. But this wasn't about being big. This was about being alive. Last week, he rolled down his window when Mama and I walked past. He was eating an apple, just sitting there eating an apple like it was normal. And he said, "Good morning, Tito. Your mama looks tired today. Does she work very hard? It must be difficult, raising a boy all alone." Mama grabbed my hand so tight it hurt, and we walked faster. But he just laughed. Not loud, just quiet, like he was enjoying a private joke. Ruggiero's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Did your mother report this?" "Yes, sir. Twice. She went to the police station on Riverside. The first time, they said kids have active imaginations. The second time, they took a report but said they couldn't do anything without evidence. Without him actually doing something." Tito's voice hardened with a bitterness that didn't belong in a 7-year-old. "They said to come back if something actually happens." "If something actually happens," Ruggiero repeated, and there was something cold and lethal in the way he said it. "Yesterday was the worst." Tito's composure began to crack. Mama was sick, but she still tried to walk me. She made it halfway before she had to stop and lean against a wall. The man was there, watching. He got out his van. Actually got out. Started walking toward us. Mama pulled me behind her, but I could see his face. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked hungry, like the stray dogs that fight over trash behind the market. What happened then? Mr. Cardoso from the deli came out. He's big, really big, with arms like tree trunks. He didn't say anything, just stood there with his arms crossed, staring at the man. The man looked at him, then looked at Mama, then at me. And he smiled again. Then he got back in his van and drove away. But slow, real slow, like he wanted us to know he wasn't scared. Like he wanted us to know he'd be back. Tito wiped his nose with the back of his hand, a gesture so childlike and vulnerable that it seemed to pierce through the morning air. This morning, Mama couldn't even get out of bed. She has a fever. She asked me to find Mrs. Chun, but Mrs. Chun left for the market. And I know the man will be there. He's always there. And this time, Mama won't be with me. This time, there won't be anyone between him and me. He looked up at Ruggiero Bellucci, this 7-year-old boy with scuffed sneakers and a backpack that had seen better days, and his voice steadied with a desperate kind of courage. "My mama taught me never to bother you, sir. Never to ask you for anything. But she also taught me that when you're drowning, you grab whatever's closest, even if it's something you're not supposed to touch. And right now, Mr. Bellucci, I'm drowning. For a long moment, Ruggiero said nothing. He simply stared at the boy, his tattooed hands still resting on his knees, his expression carved from stone. Behind him, his driver shifted nervously. The groundskeeper had abandoned all pretense of working and stood watching from a distance. Even the estate itself seemed to hold its breath. Then Ruggiero reached out slowly, deliberately, and placed one hand on Tito's shoulder. The weight of it was substantial but not crushing, powerful but not threatening. "This man in the white van. If you saw him right now, could you point him out to me?" Tito nodded quickly, relief flooding through him like warm water. "Yes, sir. He's there every morning. Same spot, same van, same smile." Ruggiero stood, his full height suddenly imposing against the morning sky. He turned toward the estate gates, and his voice, when he spoke, carried across the driveway with absolute authority. "Paolo, Marco, with me. Victor, bring the car around. We're taking a different route this morning." He looked down at Tito, and for the first time, something almost human flickered in his eyes. Not quite warmth, but recognition. Acknowledgement. "You wanted me to walk you to school, little one. So that's exactly what we're going to do. And if this shadow with the smile is waiting for you." He adjusted his silver watch with precise, deliberate movements. "Then he and I are going to have a conversation about boundaries." Tito felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. He hadn't realized until that moment just how much he'd been preparing for rejection, for dismissal, for being sent back to the staff quarters with nothing but his mother's rules ringing in his ears. Ruggiero turned toward the main house where Aaliyah had appeared on the steps, her face a mask of terror and apology, clearly preparing to drag her son away and beg forgiveness. But Ruggiero simply raised his hand, the same gesture he'd used to silence his security team, and spoke across the distance between employer and employee, between power and powerlessness. "Mrs. Longo, your son will be at school on time. You have my word." Then he looked down at Tito, and something that might have been the ghost of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Come, Tito, let's go meet your shadow. Let's see if he smiles when he sees me." The black Mercedes pulled up beside them, its engine purring like a satisfied predator. Ruggiero opened the back door himself, gesturing for Tito to enter. And as the boy climbed into the leather interior, clutching his worn backpack against his chest, he realized he'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The rules of invisibility were broken, and there was no going back. The rules of invisibility were broken, and there was no going back. The leather seat was cool against Tito's legs, softer than anything he'd ever touched in the staff quarters. The interior of the Mercedes smelled like expensive cologne and something else, something darker, like gun oil and old leather. Tito sat perfectly still, his backpack on his lap, afraid that moving too much might somehow revoke this impossible protection he'd been granted. Through the tinted windows, he could see his mother still standing on the steps of the main house, one hand pressed against the doorframe to keep herself upright, the other covering her mouth. Even from this distance, Tito could see she was crying. Not the loud, dramatic crying he sometimes heard from the soap operas Mrs. Chun watched in the kitchen. This was silent, the kind that shook her shoulders and made her look smaller, more fragile than he'd ever seen her. She mouthed something. He couldn't hear it through the glass, but he knew what she was saying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Ruggiero slid into the seat beside him, filling the space with his presence. He didn't look at Tito immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone, a sleek device that probably cost more than 6 months of Aaliyah's salary, and typed something with quick, efficient movements. Then he made a call, his voice low and clipped. "Sophia, the Longo apartment. Send Dr. Ricci. Fever, weakness, possible flu. Make sure he brings everything." He paused, listening. "I don't care if he's at the hospital. Tell him I need him at the estate in 20 minutes. Another pause. "No, not a request." He ended the call and pocketed the phone. Only then did he turn to Tito. "Your mother will be taken care of. Dr. Ricci is the best physician in the city. He'll make sure she's well." Tito's throat tightened. "Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet." Ruggiero's voice carried no warmth, but no cruelty either. It was simply factual. "We haven't reached the school. Paolo climbed into the front passenger seat, his bulk making the car dip slightly. Marco, the driver, settled behind the wheel. Both men wore expressions that suggested they'd seen many strange things in their years working for Ruggero Bellucci, but this, a 7-year-old boy in the boss's personal vehicle, headed to elementary school, might rank among the strangest. Victor pulled up behind them in a second Mercedes, this one carrying 2 more security personnel. A convoy for a school run. The absurdity of it wasn't lost on Tito, even at 7. Marco, Ruggero said quietly. Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary. Take Riverside Avenue, then cut through Patterson. I want to approach from the west side, past the bodega with the blue awning. Yes, sir. The cars rolled through the estate gates, and Tito felt his stomach clench. This was real. This was actually happening. In a few minutes, he would either see the man in the white van, or he wouldn't. And he didn't know which possibility terrified him more. If the man was there, what would happen? If he wasn't, would Mr. Bellucci think Tito had made it all up? Would he be angry? Would his mother lose her job? They drove in silence through the residential streets, past corner stores just opening their metal gates, past bus stops where people waited with coffee cups and tired eyes. The morning city coming alive, oblivious to the small war about to unfold. There, Tito whispered as they turned onto Patterson. His finger pointed toward the school, visible 2 blocks ahead. That's where he always parks, near the bodega. Marco slowed the car, and every eye turned toward the spot Tito had indicated. For a moment, nothing. Just an empty stretch of curb, a few parked cars belonging to teachers and early arriving parents. Tito's heart sank. He wasn't there. After 3 weeks of relentless presence, today, of all days, the man wasn't there. Then he saw it. The white van, partially hidden behind a delivery truck, its dented driver's side door catching the morning light. The van that had haunted his dreams, that had made every walk to school feel like running a gauntlet. That's it, Tito said, his voice barely a whisper. That's his van. Ruggero leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. Marco, pull alongside. Slowly, the Mercedes glided forward like a shark approaching prey. As they drew closer, Tito could see through the van's windshield. The man was there, sitting in the driver's seat, a coffee cup in one hand. He was younger than Tito had thought, maybe 30, with a thin face and pale skin that looked like it rarely saw sun. His hair was greasy, pulled back in a small ponytail. He wore a gray hoodie, the kind that let you blend into crowds, become forgettable. But his eyes, even from inside the car, Tito could see those eyes. They were scanning the street, watching the flow of children arriving at school, watching parents say goodbye at the gates. Hunting. That's him, Tito said, and he hated how his voice shook. That's the man. The man hadn't noticed them yet. His attention was fixed on the school entrance, where a group of children were being dropped off by their mothers. His lips moved slightly, as if he was counting, cataloging, deciding. Paolo's hand moved to his jacket, where Tito knew, somehow instinctively knew, a gun was holstered. But Ruggero placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping him. Not yet, Ruggero said quietly. I want him to see us first. I want him to understand what he's stumbled into. Marco positioned the Mercedes directly beside the white van, so close that their mirrors nearly touched. The sudden proximity seemed to register with the man. He turned, his face shifting from concentration to confusion, then to something else, something calculating. His eyes swept over the black Mercedes, taking in the tinted windows, the expensive gleam, the obvious weight of money and power. Then Ruggero lowered his window. The morning air rushed in, carrying the smell of coffee from a nearby shop, exhaust from idling cars, and something else, the sour-sweet smell of the man's unwashed van. The man stared at Ruggero, at the tattoos climbing his neck, at the cold authority in his eyes, at the silver watch that probably cost more than the van itself. Recognition flickered across the man's face. Not personal recognition. He didn't know Ruggero Bellucci by sight. But he knew the type. He knew power when he saw it. Knew the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to command absolute attention. Good morning, Ruggero said, his voice conversational, almost friendly. Beautiful day for watching children, isn't it? The man's fingers tightened on his coffee cup. His eyes darted to the school, to the street behind them, calculating escape routes. I don't know what you're talking about. No. Ruggiero tilted his head slightly. Strange, because I have a young friend here who says you've been very interested in him. Says you know his name, know his schedule, know which window belongs to his bedroom. He paused, letting each word land like a stone in still water. That's quite a lot of knowledge about a 7-year-old boy you claim not to know. The man's jaw worked silently. His free hand moved toward the ignition, but Paolo's door opened with a sharp click, and the sound of it, the promise of what would happen if he tried to run, froze him in place. I think we should have a conversation, Ruggiero continued, about boundaries, about what happens to men who frighten children in my neighborhood, about what happens to men who make mothers walk their sons to school because they're too terrified to let them walk alone. His voice dropped lower, colder. About what happens to men who work for Antonio Corelli and think they can operate on my streets without consequences. The man's face went white. The coffee cup slipped from his fingers, spilling brown liquid across his lap, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes were locked on Ruggiero, and Tito could see it the moment the man realized he hadn't been hunting a vulnerable child. He'd been hunting on a predator's territory, and now the predator had noticed. I want you to look in the back seat, Ruggiero said softly. Go ahead. Look. Slowly, reluctantly, the man's eyes shifted to the rear window of the Mercedes. To Tito, sitting there with his backpack clutched tight, his school uniform neat, his young face pressed against the glass. Their eyes met, and Tito saw something he'd never seen before in the man's expression. Fear. That's Tito Longo, Ruggiero said. And from this moment forward, he's under my protection. Do you understand what that means? The man nodded jerkily, his hands trembling. I don't think you do, Ruggiero continued. Let me be clear. If I see this van on the street again, if I hear this boy's name from your lips again, if you even think about him or his mother or anyone in their family. He leaned closer to his open window, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I will have this conversation with Antonio Corelli personally, and I will make sure he understands that the problem started with you. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the street noise seemed to fade, leaving just the two men, the gap between their vehicles, and the weight of the threat hanging in the air. Finally, the man's voice emerged, thin and ragged. Understood. Good. Ruggiero's window began to rise. Now drive away, slowly, and when you report back to Corelli, you tell him exactly what happened here. You tell him Ruggiero Bellucci is walking this boy to school every day until I decide otherwise. And you tell him if he has a problem with that, he knows where to find me. The white van's engine coughed to life. The man didn't look at Tito again, didn't look at Ruggiero. He simply pulled away from the curb and disappeared down the street, his taillights blinking once before he turned the corner and was gone. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Ruggiero's door opened, and he stepped out onto the sidewalk. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his watch, and opened Tito's door. Come, he said simply. Let's get you to school. And with his tattooed hand extended toward a 7-year-old boy in scuffed sneakers, Ruggiero Bellucci prepared to do something he hadn't done in 20 years. Walk someone to school. Tito took Ruggiero's hand, and the moment their skin touched, he felt the calluses, the rough texture of hands that had done violence, that had built an empire through force and will. But the grip was gentle, almost careful, as if Ruggiero was afraid of breaking something fragile. They stood on the sidewalk as children streamed past them toward the school gates. Parents called out last-minute reminders about homework and lunch money. A crossing guard in a neon vest blew her whistle at a car that rolled too close to the crosswalk. The ordinary machinery of a Tuesday morning, oblivious to the extraordinary nature of what was happening. Paolo and Marco flanked them at a respectful distance, their eyes scanning the street, the rooftops, the parked cars. The second Mercedes idled at the curb, Victor and the other two men watching, ready. To anyone paying attention, and several people were, this looked like a presidential security detail escorting a world leader. Not a mafia boss walking a child to elementary school. Ruggiero began walking, and Tito matched his pace, his small legs working to keep up with the man's longer stride. They crossed the street where the white van had been parked just minutes ago. Tito could still see the coffee stain on the asphalt where the cup had spilled. "Mr. Bellucci," Tito said quietly, "what did you mean when you said that man worked for Antonio Corelli?" Ruggiero glanced down at him, and for a moment, Tito thought he wouldn't answer, that he'd give some adult response about not worrying about things being handled. But instead, Ruggiero knelt, right there on the sidewalk, bringing himself to Tito's eye level. Parents and children flowed around them like water around stones. "How much do you understand about what I do, Tito?" It was a test. Tito knew that instinctively. An honest question that deserved an honest answer. "Mama says you're a businessman, but the other kids at school, their parents say you're dangerous, that you hurt people who cross you." "Both things are true," Ruggiero said simply. "I run businesses, some legal, some not. And yes, I hurt people who threaten what's mine. It's not pretty, but it's honest work in its own way. I don't pretend to be something I'm not." He gestured toward the street, toward the invisible presence of the man who just fled. "Antonio Corelli runs a different kind of business. He takes things that don't belong to him. Money, property, people." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Especially children. He sells them to people who want to hurt them. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Tito's stomach twisted. He understood enough. He'd heard whispers, seen news reports that his mother quickly turned off when he entered the room. Stories about children who disappeared, who were never found. That man in the van, he works for Corelli. He was watching you, learning your patterns, waiting for the right moment. If he'd taken you. Ruggiero's voice hardened. "Your mother would never have seen you again." The words hung between them, brutal in their simplicity. Tito felt tears prick his eyes again, but he refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of everyone. Why would Mr. Corelli want to hurt kids? Not hurt, profit. Ruggiero's tattooed hands clenched briefly before relaxing. To him, you're not a person. You're inventory, something to be sold to the highest bidder. There are people in this world, Tito, who are sick in ways you can't imagine. And Corelli feeds that sickness because it makes him rich. And you don't do that. No, the word was absolute. I've done terrible things in my life. Hurt people who deserved it, and some who probably didn't. Destroyed businesses, ruined families who got in my way. But children. He shook his head slowly. That's a line I don't cross. That's a line no one crosses in my territory. Tito studied Ruggiero's face, tried to reconcile the monster from his mother's warnings with the man kneeling before him, speaking to him like an equal. Is that why you're helping me? Because of your rules. Something flickered in Ruggiero's eyes, something old and painful. My mother was killed when I was 8 years old, shot in the street by men who wanted to send a message to my father. She threw herself over me, used her body as a shield. Her last words were, "Protect the innocent, Ruggiero. Promise me you'll protect the innocent." He stood, his hand still holding Tito's. I've broken almost every promise I've ever made in my life. But not that one. Never that one. They continued walking, and Tito felt the weight of what had just been shared, the trust implicit in Ruggiero revealing something so personal, so raw. Around them, the crowd had thickened as they approached the school gates. More parents, more children, all of them slowing, staring, trying to understand what they were witnessing. Tito recognized some of the faces. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the PDA and always looked at his mother like she was something dirty. Mr. Kowalski, whose daughter Maya was in Tito's class. Principal Richardson, standing near the entrance with a coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. And then Tito saw him. Another man, different from the one in the white van, but cut from the same cloth. He stood across the street, partially concealed behind a bus stop shelter, but not concealed enough. Dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low, hands in pockets. And that same stillness, that predatory patience that Tito had learned to recognize over 3 weeks of being hunted. He was watching them, watching Ruggiero, watching the security detail, watching everything. Tito's hand tightened involuntarily on Ruggiero's, and the man felt it immediately. His eyes followed Tito's gaze across the street, And when he saw the figure at the bus stop, his entire body language changed. Not obvious, not dramatic, but Tito felt it, the shift from protective to lethal, from guardian to predator. "Paolo," Ruggiero said quietly, never taking his eyes off the man. 10 o'clock. Bus shelter. Gray jacket. Paolo's response was immediate but subtle. He adjusted his position, his hand moving inside his jacket. Marco and the others spread out slightly, creating a perimeter without appearing to do so. The man at the bus stop realized he'd been spotted. For a moment, he froze, trapped between fleeing and maintaining his cover. Then he made his decision. He turned and walked away, not running, not panicking, but moving with purpose. Within seconds, he disappeared around a corner. "They're watching," Ruggiero said, more to himself than to Tito. "Corelli knows already. The man from the van must have called him the moment he drove away. Will they come back?" Ruggiero looked down at Tito, and his expression was unreadable. "Yes, but not the way you think. Corelli isn't stupid. He won't come at you directly, not now that I've made my position clear. But he'll respond. He has to. In our world, Tito, everything is about respect. If he lets me interfere with his operation without consequences, he looks weak. And weakness is death in our business. So what will he do? I don't know yet." Ruggiero's voice was thoughtful, calculating. "But whatever he does, it will be calculated to hurt me, to prove that my protection isn't absolute. He'll look for other targets, other children who don't have someone like me watching over them. He'll escalate to prove a point." They reached the school gates, and Tito could feel dozens of eyes on them. Parents were whispering to each other, pulling out phones to take pictures or make calls. Principal Richardson had recovered enough to start walking toward them, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. Ruggiero knelt one more time, bringing himself to Tito's level again. This time, he placed both hands on the boy's shoulders, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Tito understand this was important, maybe the most important thing anyone had ever told him. "Listen to me very carefully, Tito. What happens next won't be easy. Corelli will retaliate, and people will get hurt. Some of those people might be children, innocent children who have nothing to do with this war between him and me. And you need to understand that by asking me for help, by breaking through that barrier your mother built to keep you safe, you've started something that can't be stopped." Tito's throat felt tight. "I'm sorry." "No." Ruggiero's grip tightened slightly. "Don't apologize for surviving. Don't apologize for being brave enough to ask for help. But understand the cost. Understand that real protection isn't just about keeping one person safe. It's about being willing to fight for everyone who needs protection, even when it's dangerous, even when it costs you everything." He released Tito's shoulders and stood. "I'm going to walk you to school every morning until this is resolved. And when Corelli makes his move, because he will, I'm going to respond in a way that makes it clear that children in this neighborhood are off limits. Not just you, all of them. But that means war, Tito. Real war. Are you ready for that?" Tito thought about his mother, sick in bed but safe because Ruggiero had sent his personal doctor. He thought about the man in the white van, now too terrified to return. He thought about other children, other families who didn't have someone powerful watching over them, who lived every day with the same fear he'd carried for 3 weeks. He thought about what it meant to be brave, to stand up even when you were terrified, even when you knew there would be consequences. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice stronger than he felt. "I'm ready." Ruggiero's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened, just for a moment. Then he straightened his jacket, adjusted his watch, and turned toward the approaching principal with the same cold authority he'd shown the man in the van. "Principal Richardson," he said smoothly, "I hope you don't mind. I've decided to take a more active interest in this school security. I think we need to have a conversation about how you protect your students." And as parents stared and children whispered and the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, Ruggiero Bellucci prepared to do something he'd never done before. Declare war on behalf of the innocent. Principal Richardson approached with the careful steps of a man walking through a minefield. He was in his mid-50s, with gray hair carefully combed over a balding spot and a tie that had seen better days. A good man, Tito thought, but not a brave one. The kind who followed rules because rules kept you safe from making difficult decisions. Mr. Bellucci, Richardson said, his voice professionally pleasant but strained. I wasn't aware you had a child enrolled at our school. I don't. Ruggiero's hand remained on Tito's shoulder, a clear statement of ownership, of protection. But Mrs. Longo, one of my household staff, does. And it's come to my attention that your security measures are inadequate. Richardson's pleasant expression flickered. I assure you, we take student safety very seriously. We have protocols, procedures. Protocols. Ruggiero's voice carried across the schoolyard, and conversations died around them. Parents stopped mid-sentence. Children froze on the playground equipment. Even the crossing guard turned to watch. Tell me, Principal Richardson, when Mrs. Longo came to you 3 weeks ago, terrified because a man was following her son, what did your protocols tell you to do? Richardson's face went pale. We advised her to contact the police. We can't. She did contact the police. Twice. They dismissed her concerns, called it an overactive imagination, told her to come back if something actually happened. Ruggiero's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. So I'll ask again, what did your protocols tell you to do when a mother came to you, desperate for help, and the police refused to act? The silence was absolute. Richardson opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came. Ruggiero released Tito's shoulder and pulled out his phone. He didn't break eye contact with Richardson as he dialed, putting the call on speaker. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Captain Morrison. Marcus. It's Ruggiero Bellucci. A pause. The kind of pause that spoke volumes about their history, about the complex relationship between law enforcement and organized crime, about the lines that got blurred when power and politics intersected. Mr. Bellucci, it's early for you to be calling. I'm standing outside Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School with a 7-year-old boy named Tito Longo. Does that name mean anything to you? Another pause, longer this time. Should it? His mother, Aaliyah Longo, filed 2 reports at your precinct. Reports about a man in a white van following her son. Reports your officers dismissed. I have copies of those reports, Marcus, dated, signed by your desk sergeants. Would you like me to read them to you? The silence on the other end was heavy. In the background, Tito could hear phones ringing, voices murmuring. The sounds of a police station starting its day. I'd have to look into that, Morrison finally said, his tone carefully neutral. You do that, because I just had a conversation with the man in the white van this morning. His name is Dennis Kohler. He works for Antonio Corelli's trafficking network, and he was 2 days away from taking this child. Ruggiero's voice hardened. So when you look into those reports, Marcus, I want you to ask yourself what your officers were doing when a mother was begging for help. I want you to ask yourself what protocols failed, and then I want you to fix it. Mr. Bellucci, I can't just. Yes, you can. Because if something like this happens again, if one more parent comes to your precinct terrified for their child's safety and your officers dismiss them, I will make it my personal mission to ensure that every single person in this city knows that the police can't be trusted to protect children. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Morrison's voice, when it came, was tight with barely suppressed anger. Is it a threat? No, Marcus. It's a promise. I'm done watching children suffer because the people who are supposed to protect them are too overworked, too understaffed, or too indifferent to do their jobs. Ruggiero looked around at the crowd of parents and teachers, at the phones recording this conversation, at the dozens of witnesses. From this moment forward, I'm taking an active interest in the safety of children in this neighborhood, and I expect the police department to do the same. If you can't provide that protection, I will. And you know exactly what that means. He ended the call before Morrison could respond. The silence that followed was deafening. Parents stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to fear to something that might have been gratitude. Teachers clustered near the entrance, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. And Tito stood beside this man who had just publicly declared war on indifference, on bureaucracy, on the systems that had failed him. Ruggiero turned back to Richardson, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. Now, Principal Richardson, let's talk about security. I'm going to have my people conduct an assessment of this school. Entrances, exits, blind spots, weaknesses. And then we're going to fix them. At my expense. Mr. Bellucci, I appreciate the offer, but I need to clear that with the school board. Then clear it. Ruggiero's tone left no room for negotiation. Because I'm walking Tito to school every morning until I'm satisfied that he and every other child here is safe. And trust me, Principal Richardson, you want me satisfied. Because an unsatisfied Ruggiero Bellucci asking questions about school security, about why a child was being stalked for 3 weeks while adults did nothing, is not good for anyone's career. Richardson swallowed hard. I'll make the calls. Good. Ruggiero knelt beside Tito one final time, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that only the boy could hear. You're safe now. Do you believe me? Tito nodded, not trusting his voice. When school ends, my driver will be waiting. He'll take you home. Tomorrow morning, I'll be here at 7:15. Same routine. We'll do this every day until Corelli learns his lesson. He squeezed Tito's shoulder gently. Be brave, little one. And if anyone, teacher, student, parent, asks you why I'm here, you tell them the truth. You tell them you were scared, and you asked for help, and someone finally listened. He stood and addressed the crowd that had gathered, his voice carrying across the schoolyard with absolute authority. My name is Ruggiero Bellucci. Some of you know who I am. Some of you don't. But all of you should know this. Children in this neighborhood are now under my protection. Not just Tito. All of them. If your child is being threatened, if they're being followed, if they're in danger and the proper authorities won't help, you come to me. You come to my estate, you leave a message with my staff, and I will handle it. Mrs. Patterson, the PTA president who'd always looked down on Tito's mother, found her voice. Mr. Bellucci, with all due respect, we can't have, that is, it's not appropriate for a criminal to care about children. Ruggiero finished for her. You're right, Mrs. Patterson. It's not appropriate. Just like it's not appropriate that mothers have to walk their sons to school because they're being stalked by traffickers. Just like it's not appropriate that police ignore reports because they're understaffed. Just like it's not appropriate that 7-year-old boys have to choose between being invisible and being safe. His eyes swept across the crowd. But here we are, in a world where none of this is appropriate, and it's happening anyway. So you can either accept my help, or you can explain to your children why you refused it. He turned and walked back toward his car, Paolo and Marco falling in a step behind him. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, no one willing to stand in his path. At the Mercedes, he paused and looked back at the school, at Tito standing near the entrance with his backpack and his scuffed sneakers, looking small and vulnerable and impossibly brave. Their eyes met across the distance, and Ruggiero gave a single nod. A promise. A covenant. Then he slid into the back seat, and the Mercedes pulled away, the second car following close behind. The schoolyard remained frozen for several heartbeats. Then Principal Richardson cleared his throat and tried to restore normalcy. All right, everyone. Bell rings in 5 minutes. Students, please head to your classrooms. But nothing was normal anymore. Parents pulled their children closer, whispering urgently. Teachers exchanged worried glances. And Tito felt dozens of eyes on him as he walked toward the building, no longer invisible, no longer just another child from the staff quarters. He was the boy who'd broken the rules, the boy who'd asked the monster for help, the boy who'd started a war. Maya Kowalski appeared beside him, her blonde braids bouncing as she matched his pace. Was that really Ruggiero Bellucci? The actual Ruggiero Bellucci? Yes. And he walked you to school? Like, held your hand and everything? Yes. She was quiet for a moment, processing this impossible information. Then, in a way only children can, she cut straight to what mattered. That man who was following you. Is he gone now? Tito thought about the white van driving away, about the fear in Dennis Kohler's eyes, about Ruggiero's promise. Yes, he's gone. Good. Maya grabbed his hand, squeezing it tight. I'm glad you're not scared anymore. They walked into the school together, 2 7-year-olds navigating a world that had suddenly become more dangerous and more protected than either of them could fully understand. Behind them, parents continued to whisper, phones continued to record, and the machinery of response began to turn. By noon, The video of Ruggero Bellucci threatening a police captain on behalf of a child would have 10,000 views. By evening, Antonio Corelli would see it and understand that the rules of their war had just changed. And by the next morning, he would make his move. The photos arrived at 6:47 a.m., delivered to Ruggero's personal phone through an encrypted messaging app that only a handful of people knew existed. He was in his study, already dressed in another pinstripe suit, this one charcoal with thin silver threads, preparing for his second morning walk with Tito. His coffee sat untouched on the mahogany desk as he reviewed security reports for the night shift. The phone buzzed once, a single notification that changed everything. The first photo showed a girl, maybe 9 years old, with dark curls and a gap-toothed smile. School photo, probably from last year. Bright blue background, the kind every elementary school used. Over her face, painted in digital red, a thick X bold. Deliberate, unmistakable. The second photo, a boy with freckles and glasses, perhaps 8. Same blue background, same red X. The third, twin girls with matching ponytails and identical smiles. 10, maybe 11. The X covered both their faces, making them indistinguishable from each other even in death's preview. The fourth, a boy with a buzz cut and serious eyes, 7 or 8. Athletic build visible even in the school portrait. The X centered perfectly over his solemn expression. Below the photos, a single line of text. You protect one. I take 4. Do the math, Bellucci. Ruggero's hand tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white. His jaw clenched, so hard his teeth ached. Every muscle in his body coiled with barely contained rage, the kind that made men disappear, that leveled buildings, that started blood feuds lasting generations. But he didn't move, didn't throw the phone, didn't shout, because rage without control was useless. And Antonio Corelli was counting on him to lose control, to make mistakes, to prove that protecting the innocent made you weak. He forwarded the photos to Paolo with 2 words, find them. Then he made another call. Victor answered on the first ring. Increased security at the Longo apartment. Double shifts. No one gets within 50 feet of that building without identification. And I want eyes on Martin Luther King Elementary. Not just this morning. 24 hours. Every entrance, every window, every shadow. Already done, boss. We locked it down last night. Good. Ruggero's voice was ice-wrapped in steel. Now lock down every elementary school within 5 miles. I want our people watching. I want patterns documented. Every van, every car that doesn't belong, every adult who lingers too long. I want names, plates, photos. Everything. That's a lot of territory, boss. We're talking 30, maybe 40 schools. We don't have enough men for. Then hire more. Pull people from the docks, the gambling operations, the protection routes. I don't care. This is priority 1. Everything else stops until we find these children. A pause. Corelli's going to see this as weakness. He's going to think. Let him think whatever he wants. Ruggero stood, walking to the window that overlooked the estate grounds. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Beautiful. Innocent. The kind of morning that should have belonged to children waking up safely in their beds. He took 4 children to prove a point, to show me that my protection is meaningless, that for every one I save, he can destroy 4 more. So what do? We find them, all 4, and then we show Corelli what happens when you wage war on the innocent. He checked his watch. 7:02 a.m. Give me everything you can on those photos. Reverse image search, metadata, anything. I need to know which schools they attended, when the photos were taken, if they're recent or archived. Move fast. Corelli won't keep them alive long. He doesn't need them alive. He just needs them dead to make his point. He ended the call and stared at the photos again, forcing himself to memorize each face. The girl with curls who probably loved to read. The boy with glasses who might have been teased for being smart. The twins who finished each other's sentences. The serious boy who carried responsibility too early. 4 futures erased because he'd chosen to protect one. A knock at the door. Marco entered without waiting for permission, his face grim. Boss, we've got confirmation. for children reported missing in the last 12 hours. Different neighborhoods, different schools, but all fitting the profiles in those photos. Parents, single mothers, every one of them. Working class, the kind who can't afford private security, who rely on police that won't come, who thought their kids were safe because this is supposed to be a good neighborhood. Marco's voice cracked slightly. He had 2 daughters of his own. Corelli chose them specifically. Maximum impact, minimum resistance. Ruggiero's phone buzzed again. Another message from the same encrypted number. This time, just text. Clock's ticking, Bellucci. You want to be a hero? Heroes have to make choices. Which 4 do you let die to save your one? The psychology was clear. Corelli was trying to force an impossible decision. Abandon Tito proved that protection was conditional, that could be bought or intimidated away. Or continue protecting Tito while 4 other children suffered for it. A false choice. The kind abusers and predators always offered. Save yourself or save them. Protect your own or watch strangers burn. Choose the lesser evil and live with the guilt. Ruggiero deleted the message and made another call. This one to someone outside his organization, someone who lived in the gray spaces between law and lawlessness. Angela, it's Ruggiero. I need a favor. Detective Angela Torres had worked organized crime for 15 years. She'd arrested 3 of Ruggiero's lieutenants, testified against 2 of his business partners, and once told him to his face that she'd dance on his grave. But she was also the only cop in the city who actually gave a damn about missing children. Bellucci, this better be good. I'm off duty. 4 children. Taken last night. I just received photos with red X's over their faces. Corelli's work. The silence on the other end was different now. Focused. Send me what you have. Angela, send it. Now, we'll deal with how you got it later. He forwarded the photos. Heard her sharp intake of breath. Son of a bitch. That's Maya Washington from Riverside Elementary. And those twins, I know them. The Hernandez girls. Their mother works at the hospital night shift. She called it in at 3 a.m. when they weren't in their beds. Torres's voice went cold and professional. What does Corelli want? He want me to stop protecting Tito Longo. Want me to prove that my word is conditional. That I'll abandon 1 child to save 4. Will you? No. Then he'll kill them. You know that. Not if we find them first. Ruggiero glanced at his watch again. 7:09 a.m. I'm putting every resource I have into this. But I need you to do something the department won't. I need you to look at Corelli's properties, his associates, his patterns. I need you to tell me where he'd take 4 children he planned to kill within 24 hours. That's asking me to share active investigation details with a known criminal. Yes. I could lose my badge. Yes. Another pause. Then, there's an abandoned textile factory on Pier 19. Corelli's cousin owned it before foreclosure. It's been empty for 3 years, but we've had reports of activity there. Vehicles coming and going at odd hours. The kind of place you'd take someone if you didn't want them found. Thank you. Bellucci, when this is over, when those kids are safe, you and I are going to have a conversation about boundaries. I'll look forward to it. He ended the call and immediately contacted Paolo. Pier 19. Abandoned textile factory. Get a team together. Full tactical. Body armor. Suppressed weapons. Medical support. We go in quiet. We go in fast. And we don't leave without those children. When? Noon. Corelli will expect us to wait, to plan, to coordinate with police. We hit him while he's confident. Ruggiero pulled his suit jacket from the chair, shrugging it on with practiced precision. And Paolo? No prisoners. Anyone in that building who isn't a child doesn't walk out. Understood. Ruggiero checked his appearance in the mirror. Perfect. Not a hair out of place, not a wrinkle in his suit. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who made the world bend to his will through force and fear. But today he would be something else too. A man who kept his promises. His phone buzzed one final time. Another message from Corelli, 7:15. That's when you usually leave to walk your pet project to school. Make your choice, Bellucci. Walk 1 child to safety while 4 die alone in the dark. Or stay home and prove that protection is just another word for weakness. Ruggiero pocketed the phone and walked downstairs. The Mercedes was already idling in the driveway. Paolo and Marco waited beside it, along with Victor and 3 other men. All of them looked at him with the same question in their eyes. What do we do? Paolo, you're with me. We're walking Tito to school. Marco, take the team to Pier 19. Set up surveillance, but do not engage until I arrive. Victor, I want updates every 15 minutes. If anyone so much as breathes wrong near that factory, I want to know about it. He slid into the back seat, and as the car began moving toward the staff quarters where Tito was probably eating breakfast, probably nervous about their second walk together, Ruggiero made a decision that would define everything that followed. He would keep his promise to Tito. He would walk him to school, holding his hand, showing the neighborhood that protection wasn't negotiable. And then he would go to war, because Antonio Corelli had made a fundamental miscalculation. He'd assumed that caring about one child meant abandoning all others. That protection was a limited resource, something that had to be rationed, divided, diluted. But Ruggiero Bellucci had spent 30 years building an empire. He had money, men, connections, and a willingness to do violence that made even other criminals nervous. And now he was going to use every bit of that empire to prove that you could protect them all. The Mercedes pulled up to the staff quarters. Tito emerged, his backpack ready, his mother watching from the doorway with tears in her eyes. The boy's face lit up when he saw Ruggiero step out of the car. Good morning, Mr. Bellucci. Good morning, Tito. Ruggiero extended his hand, and the boy took it without hesitation. Ready for school? Yes, sir. As they began walking, Ruggiero's phone vibrated in his pocket. Another message, another taunt, another attempt to break his resolve. He didn't look at it, because 4 children were running out of time, and he had promises to keep. The walk to school took exactly 18 minutes. Ruggiero counted every second, felt every tick of his watch like a hammer blow against his ribs. Tito chatted about a science project on volcanoes, about how Maya Kowalski had shared her cookies at lunch yesterday, about how his teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, said he was doing better in reading. Normal things. 7-year-old things. The kind of conversation that should have been happening in thousands of homes across the city right now. Except in 4 homes, mothers were staring at empty beds. In 4 homes, breakfast sat untouched on kitchen tables. In 4 homes, the morning had brought only silence and terror. When they reached the school gates, Tito looked up at him with complete trust. Same time tomorrow, Mr. Bellucci? Same time tomorrow, Ruggiero confirmed, squeezing the boy's hand once before releasing it. Be good. I will. Ruggiero watched until Tito disappeared through the school doors, then turned to Paolo. Call everyone. I mean everyone. Conference call in 30 minutes. I want every captain, every lieutenant, every crew boss who answers to me on that line. Boss, it's not even 8 in the morning. Some of them are. I don't care if they're in bed with the mayor's wife. Get them on the phone. He slid into the Mercedes, his mind already racing through logistics, resources, angles of approach. And give me Salvatore. Paolo's expression shifted to something close to alarm. Salvatore? Boss, he's been retired for 5 years. He barely leaves his house in Brooklyn. He'll leave it for this. 28 minutes later, Ruggiero sat in his study with his phone on speaker, surrounded by Paolo, Marco, and Victor. The conference line crackled with the voices of 17 men, representing every major operation in his organization. Gambling dens in Little Italy, protection rackets in Chinatown, shipping operations at the docks, loan operations in the financial district, money laundering through 3 dozen legitimate businesses. His empire, built over 30 years, worth hundreds of millions, and he was about to shut all of it down. Gentlemen, Ruggiero began, his voice cutting through the murmur of confused voices. As of this moment, all operations are suspended. Gambling houses, close them. Shipping runs, cancel them. Protection collections, postpone them. Loan payments, they can wait. Everything stops. Right now, the silence that followed was stunned, absolute. Then the voices erupted. Boss, you can't be serious. We've got 3 shipments coming in tonight, worth $2 million. The gambling houses alone pull in 50 grand a day. We can't just... Enough. Ruggiero's voice didn't rise in volume. but something in it made every voice die instantly. 4 children were taken last night, kidnapped by Antonio Corelli to prove a point, to prove that my protection is meaningless, that caring about the innocent makes me weak. He leaned forward, his tattooed hands flat on the desk. I need every man who works for me on the street. I need eyes everywhere. I need information. I need someone to tell me where Corelli is keeping these children, and I need it in the next 4 hours. That's more important than money, more important than territory, more important than anything else we do. Boss, came the voice of Michael Torino, who ran the waterfront operations. With respect, this is suicide. We shut down everything, we lose momentum. Other families will see it as weakness. They'll move on our territory, undercut our prices, poach our people. It'll take months to rebuild what we lose in one day. Then it takes months. Ruggiero's tone was flat, final. Michael, how many children do you have? 3, boss. 2 girls and a boy. And if one of them was taken, if someone put an X over their face and told you they had hours to live, what would you pay to get them back? Silence. Everything, Michael said quietly. I'd pay everything. Then you understand. These 4 children, they're not mine. I don't know their parents. Never met them. But they're in this position because I chose to protect Tito Longo. Because I drew a line and said children in this neighborhood are off limits. That makes this my responsibility. Another voice, this one belonging to Frank Giordano, who managed the loan operations. Boss, even if we mobilize everyone, we're talking about maybe 200 men. The city has 8 million people. How we find 4 kids in that? We start with what we know. Ruggiero pulled up the photos on his tablet, forwarding them to the group. These are the children. Their names are Maya Washington, Isaac Goldstein, and twins Rosa and Maria Hernandez. They were taken from their homes between midnight and 3 a.m. Corelli wouldn't risk moving them far, not with 4 separate pickups. That means they're somewhere within an hour's drive of all 4 locations. Victor spread a map across the desk, marking the 4 homes with red pins. That gives us this radius. He drew a circle encompassing roughly 30 square miles of city. Still too much ground to cover. Not if we're smart. Ruggiero zoomed in on the map. Corelli needs somewhere isolated. Somewhere his men can work without neighbors hearing screams. Somewhere abandoned or under his control. That eliminates residential areas, business districts, anywhere with foot traffic. Paolo tapped the map. Industrial zones. Warehouses. Old factories. The waterfront. Exactly. And Detective Torres already gave us one location. Pier 19, abandoned textile factory. Ruggiero looked up at the phone. Michael, you know the waterfront better than anyone. How many abandoned buildings do we have between Pier 15 and Pier 25? Maybe 8, 10 if you count the storage facilities that got shut down after the fire inspection scandals. I want teams at every single one, not just Pier 19. Every abandoned building, every empty warehouse, every structure that could hide 4 children. Visual confirmation only. No one goes in until I give the order. Corelli's expecting us to hit Pier 19 hard and fast. If he's smart, he'll have moved them somewhere else, using the factory as a decoy. That's a lot of manpower, boss. Which is why we're shutting down everything else. Ruggiero stood, pacing to the window. Frank, pull your collection crews. Every single one. They're now search teams. Michael, your dock workers, same thing. Tony, your casino security, I want them on the street. Everyone else, same directive. We blanket this city. We knock on doors. We check cameras. We lean on informants. Someone saw something. Someone always sees something. The voice of Salvatore Mancini, gravelly with age and cigarettes, finally spoke. He was the old guard, the man who'd taught Ruggiero the business when he was just a teenager with rage in his heart. Ruggiero, my boy, you're asking us to bet the entire empire on 4 children we don't know. Yes, Corelli will see this as confirmation that you've gone soft. Every family from Boston to Miami will hear about this. They'll say Ruggiero Bellucci sacrificed his business for sentimentality. Let them say it. They'll test you. Push boundaries. Try to take what's yours while you're distracted. Let them try. Ruggiero's voice was steel. Salvatore, you taught me that power comes from fear. That respect, is earned through violence. That in this business, you never show weakness. And you were right. For 30 years, I built an empire on those principles. He turned from the window, facing the phone as if he could see through it to the old man in Brooklyn. But you also taught me something else. You told me, the night my mother died, that the difference between animals and men is that men protect the pack. That real power isn't just taking what you want. It's having the strength to protect what matters. A long pause, then Salvatore's dry laugh. I said that. Must have been drunk. You were, but you meant it. Ruggiero picked up the tablet, looking at the four faces again. These children matter, and if I can't protect them, if I let them die because I was worried about losing money or territory or respect, then what the hell am I building this empire for? To survive, Salvatore said quietly. Same reason we all do this. No, we do this because we can, because we're good at it, because the world is full of predators, and sometimes the only way to survive is to become the biggest predator in the room. Ruggiero set the tablet down. But that doesn't mean we have to hunt the innocent. Corelli made a choice. He decided that children were just another resource to exploit. And I'm making a different choice. I'm saying not here, not in my city, not while I have breath in my body and men who'll follow me. The conference line was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the voices came back. I'm in, Michael said. Dock operations are shut down. I'll have 40 men on the street in an hour. Casino security is yours, Tony added. Another 30 men. Collection crews are mobilizing now, Frank confirmed. Voice after voice, commitment after commitment, until all 17 captains had pledged their resources. Ruggiero felt something unfamiliar in his chest, something that might have been pride or hope, or simply the recognition that he'd surrounded himself with men who, despite everything, still understood what mattered. One more thing, Ruggiero said. I'm offering a reward. $1 million. Cash. To anyone who provides information leading to these children's safe return. Spread the word. Every snitch, every informant, every two-bit criminal who owes us favors. Someone knows where Corelli is keeping them. Make it worth their while to talk. Boss, $1 million is pocket change compared to what we'll lose shutting down operations. But more importantly, it sends a message. It tells this city that I'm serious. That protecting children isn't just words. It's action backed by resources. He checked his watch. 8:47 a.m. We have maybe 6 hours before Corelli decides these kids are more trouble than they're worth. Move fast. Move smart. And remember, we're not just saving 4 children. We're proving that there are still lines that can't be crossed. That some things matter more than profit. He ended the conference call and turned to Paolo. Get the word out through every channel we have. Street level, all the way up. I want that reward posted on every corner, in every bar, every place where people who see things gather. And make sure it reaches Corelli's people too. Let them know that their loyalty is worth whatever he's paying them. But these children are worth more. You think someone will flip? Someone always flips. Corelli's men are loyal until loyalty costs them something. We just made betraying him worth $1 million. Ruggiero pulled on his jacket, checking that his gun was secure in its shoulder holster. Now let's go find those kids. Marco already has teams moving on Pier 19. We'll coordinate from there. As they headed for the door, Salvatore's voice came through on Ruggiero's personal line. Ruggiero, one last thing. Yes, your mother would be proud. She always said you had too much rage and not enough heart. Looks like she was wrong about the heart part. The line went dead before Ruggiero could respond. He stood there for a moment, phone in hand, remembering a woman who'd thrown herself over a child, who'd used her last breath to extract a promise. Protect the innocent. He was keeping that promise, even if it cost him everything. The first call came at 9:23 a.m. Paolo's phone buzzed as they were coordinating teams outside a warehouse on Pier 17. He answered, listened for 30 seconds, then covered the microphone. Boss, we got someone. Says he has information about the white van. Ruggiero took the phone. This is Bellucci. The voice on the other end was nervous, accented older. Mr. Bellucci, my name is Gene Park. I own the laundromat on Patterson Street, 3 blocks from Martin Luther King Elementary. I saw what you did yesterday. walking that little boy to school, standing up to those men. What do you have for me, Mr. Park? The white van, the one that was following the boy. I see it many times before, maybe 10, 12 times in the last month. Always early morning, always near the school. But yesterday, after you spoke to the driver, I see it again. Different place. Ruggiero's pulse quickened. Where? Industrial Park, near the old Henderson Paint Factory on 52nd Street. I deliver clean uniforms there for the security company. They still have one guard, even though the factory is closed. When I arrived yesterday, maybe 2 p.m., I see the white van. Same dent on the door. It's parked behind the factory, trying to hide. Did you see the driver? No, but I see something else. Another van. Blue panel van, no windows. It arrives maybe 10 minutes after the white van. 3 men get out. They go inside the factory. They carry, his voice dropped, they carry things wrapped in blankets. Small things. Child-sized things. The world narrowed to a single point. What time was this? 2:30. Maybe 2:45. I leave quickly. I don't want to see more. But this morning, I hear about the missing children. 4 children. And I think about the blankets. A pause, heavy with guilt. I should have called police. But police in my neighborhood, they don't come when we call. They don't care about people like me. So when I hear about your reward, I think maybe you care. Maybe you actually do something. Mr. Park, you did the right thing. Henderson Paint Factory on 52nd. You're certain? Yes. I go there every week for 3 years. I know that building. One more question. The blue van. Did you see a plate number? Any identifying marks? Plate was covered. Mud maybe, or paint. But on the side, very faded, I see part of logo. Red letters. Maybe says Metro or Medical. Hard to see. Ruggiero gestured sharply at Marco, who immediately pulled up a map on his tablet. Mr. Park, that $1 million is yours. Give your bank information to my associate. The money will be there by end of business today. I don't want money. I want those children safe. I have grandchildren. Every night, I think about what happens if someone takes them. If no one helps. His voice strengthened. You helped that boy yesterday. Now you help these children. That's worth more than money. You'll get both. Paolo will take your information. And Mr. Park? Thank you. He handed the phone back to Paolo and turned to Marco. Henderson Paint Factory. How far from here? 20 minutes. Maybe 15 if we push it. Get teams moving, but quiet. If Corelli has people watching, I don't want them spooked. Ruggiero pulled out his own phone, calling Victor. Henderson Paint Factory on 52nd. That's our primary target now. Keep teams on Pier 19 as backup, but I want our main force repositioned. How many men do we have mobile? 70, maybe 80, more coming in from the outer routes. Send 40 to Henderson. The rest stay flexible, cover the perimeter. And Victor, tell them weapons tight. We go in, those children are the priority. Not revenge, not sending messages. We get them out alive. Everything else is secondary. The second call came at 9:47 a.m. while they were en route. This time it was Marco's phone. A woman's voice, shaking but determined. My name is Carmen Rodriguez. I clean offices downtown. I heard Mr. Bellucci is looking for information about missing children. Marco put on speaker. Ruggiero leaned forward from the back seat. I'm listening, Ms. Rodriguez. This morning, I cleaned the office building on 48th Street. 5th floor, there's a lawyer's office. Usually empty by 6 a.m. when I arrive. But today I hear voices. Angry voices. I stop outside the door. I know I shouldn't listen, but something feels wrong. What did you hear? 2 men. One says Bellucci shut down everything. Everything. 4 brats. The other one, he laughs. Says, let him. While he's playing hero, we move on his territory. By the time those kids are found, we'll own half his operations. Then the first one says, if they're found. Antonio says we move them by noon. Take them to the secondary location. New Jersey, across the river. Bellucci will waste all day searching the city while we're already gone. Ruggiero exchanged glances with Paolo and Marco. Did they say we're in New Jersey? No, but they say something about a warehouse. Near the turnpike. And one of them, he complains about the drive. Says it's 90 minutes from Henderson Factory. Henderson Factory. Do they actually say that name? Yes. The second man, he says Henderson is secure until noon. Then we move them. Antonio's orders. Ms. Rodriguez, you may have just saved 4 lives. My associate will take your information for the reward. I don't want it. Her voice broke slightly. I have a daughter, 8 years old. She walks to school by herself because I work early mornings. Every day I worry. Every day I pray someone watches over her. Yesterday, I see on the news what you did for that little boy. I think maybe someone is watching. Maybe someone cares. So when I hear about these missing children, I know I have to help. That's what mothers do. We protect each other's children. By 10:15 a.m., the phone lines were overwhelmed. A janitor from Jefferson Community College called to report seeing a blue panel van near campus 3 days ago. The driver had been watching the playground, taking photos. A bodega owner near Riverside Elementary provided footage from his security camera showing the same blue van circling the block repeatedly on Tuesday night. A taxi driver called to say he'd picked up a fare near Henderson Factory at 3 a.m. The passenger, nervous and sweating, had asked to be taken to a bus station. Paid in cash, kept looking over his shoulder. A grandmother from the Patterson Street neighborhood walked directly into one of Ruggiero's gambling houses, now closed, and demanded to speak to whoever was in charge. She told the startled guards that she'd seen 3 men loading bundles into a factory side door 2 nights ago. She hadn't thought anything of it until she saw the news about missing children. I'm 74 years old, she told them. I got nothing to lose. You find those babies. The information flooded in, piece by piece, fragment by fragment. People who'd spent their lives being invisible, who'd learned that speaking up only brought trouble, who'd been taught that powerful men didn't care about people like them. They were speaking now. Paolo coordinated from one phone, Marco from another. Victor ran a command center from a coffee shop 3 blocks from Henderson Factory, mapping every piece of intelligence on a growing tactical picture. At 10:44 a.m., a security guard from Henderson Factory itself called. His voice was barely above a whisper. My name is Robert Chun. I work night shift at Henderson. I wasn't supposed to be here last night. I was covering for my cousin, but I saw them bring the children in. 4 kids. Unconscious. They took them to the basement, to the old chemical storage room. It's soundproof, isolated. I wanted to call police, but the men, they were armed. Professional. And I got a family. I got kids of my own. You're calling now, Ruggiero said quietly. That takes courage. I saw what you did. Walking that boy to school. My daughter, she goes to King Elementary too. She came home yesterday talking about how the scary man with tattoos wasn't scary at all. How he protected Tito. How he made her feel safe. Robert's voice strengthened. So I'm calling. The children are in the basement. East corner. There's 6 men guarding them. They're planning to move them at noon. You got maybe an hour, maybe less. Robert, you need to leave that building. Right now. Get in your car and drive away. Don't tell anyone. Don't give warning. Just go. Already gone. I'm calling from my car 2 blocks away. I couldn't stay. Couldn't look at those men knowing what they're doing. You did exactly right. The reward money is yours. Keep it. Give it to the families. They're going to need it after this. By 11 a.m., they had everything they needed. Building layout from city records. Guard rotations from Robert Chun. Entry points from a construction worker who'd renovated the building 6 years ago. Sightlines from a photographer who'd used the roof for a project. The location of the basement chemical storage room. The number of hostiles. The probable weapons. The timing of the planned transfer. Ruggiero stood outside the Henderson factory, watching his men take positions. 40 of them, spread across rooftops, alleyways, surrounding the building in a loose perimeter. Not his usual crew of enforcers and collectors. These were dock workers and casino security, grocery store managers, and truck drivers. Men who'd spent the morning calling in every favor, chasing every lead, because a 7-year-old boy had been brave enough to ask for help. Because a neighborhood had decided that silence wasn't safety anymore. Marco approached, his face grim but determined. We're in position. Teams Alpha and Bravo have the exits covered. Team Charlie is ready to breach the basement access. Victor has eyes on the interior from the drone. 6 hostiles confirmed, basement level. No sign of the children, but Robert says they're in the chemical room, no windows, no way to see inside without entry. Weapons status? 3 with rifles, 3 with handguns. Body armor on 2 of them. They're professionals, boss. Corelli's best. Ruggiero checked his watch. 11:17 a.m. We go in 20 minutes. 11:37. That gives us 23 minutes before their planned transfer. We hit them while they're confident, while they think we're still searching the waterfront. He pulled out his phone and made one last call. To Detective Angela Torres. Torres, we found them. Henderson Paint Factory on 52nd. Basement level. 6 armed guards. We're going in at 11:37. A long pause. Bellucci, I can't authorize. I'm not asking for authorization. I'm telling you where to send the ambulances. Because in 30 minutes, 4 children are going to need medical attention. And approximately 6 men are going to need body bags. You can't just... Angela, those kids have maybe an hour before Corelli moves them out of state. You want to waste that hour getting warrants and assembling SWAT teams. That's your choice. But I'm going in, with or without badges. Another pause. Then, quietly, ambulances will be staged 2 blocks out. We'll move in after you secure the site. Thank you. Bellucci, try to keep them alive. The suspects, I mean. I need someone to testify against Corelli. I'll try. No promises. He pocketed the phone and turned to face his assembled men. 40 faces looking back at him. Men who'd chosen to be here instead of running their operations, making their money, living their lives. Men who'd answer the call because sometimes, rarely, the world demanded you choose between profit and principle. Listen up, Ruggiero said, his voice carrying across the group. In 20 minutes, we go in. 4 children are in that basement. Maya Washington, age 9. Isaac Goldstein, age 8. Rosa and Maria Hernandez, age 11. They've been held for almost 12 hours. They're terrified. They're probably hurt. And they're counting on us to bring them home. He met each man's eyes in turn. The men inside are professionals. They're armed, they're dangerous, and they won't surrender easily. Some of you might get hurt. Some of you might die. And for what? For 4 kids you've never met. For families you don't know. For a principal that doesn't pay your bills or protect your own families. You let that sink in. Let them feel the weight of what they were about to do. But here's what I know. Every one of you had a mother who worried when you left the house. Every one of you has children or nieces or nephews who walk to school every day, vulnerable, trusting that the world will protect them. And today, we get to be that protection. Today, we get to prove that some lines can't be crossed. That children are off limits. That in this neighborhood, in this city, there are still people who give a damn. He pulled his gun from its holster, checked the chamber. We go in quiet. We go in fast. We get those children and we get out. Anyone who stands in our way goes down. No mercy, no hesitation. This is war, gentlemen. And in war, you protect your own. 40 hands reached for weapons. 40 men prepared to risk everything. Because a 7-year-old boy had been brave enough to ask for help. And a neighborhood had finally found its voice. At 11:37 a.m. exactly, they moved. Team Charlie breached the basement access with bolt cutters, the lock giving way with a sharp crack that echoed through the empty factory. The door swung open on rusted hinges, revealing a concrete stairwell descending into darkness. Marco went first, weapon raised, followed by 3 men who'd worked his docks for a decade. Behind them, Paolo led the secondary team through the main entrance, moving with practice silence through the factory floor. Ruggiero followed Marco down the stairs, his own gun drawn, every sense heightened. The basement smelled of chemicals and decay, abandoned machinery and human fear. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that moved and shifted like living things. They found the first guard at the bottom of the stairs. He was young, maybe 25, smoking a cigarette and checking his phone. He looked up, saw 4 armed men descending toward him, and his hand moved toward his weapon. Marco fired once, suppressed pistol making a sound like a heavy book dropped on carpet. The guard went down, phone clattering across concrete. The sound brought the others running. 2 appeared from a side corridor, weapons drawn. The firefight lasted 11 seconds. Ruggiero put 2 rounds into the first man's chest before he could fire. The second managed to get off a wild shot that sparked off a metal railing before Paolo's team, entering from above, caught him in a crossfire. He dropped hard, his rifle skittering across the floor. 3 down, 3 to go. The remaining guards had barricaded themselves in the chemical storage room. Ruggiero could see the heavy steel door, industrial grade, the kind designed to contain toxic materials. And behind it, for children who'd been living in terror for 12 hours. "This is Ruggiero Bellucci," he called out, his voice echoing through the basement. "You have 10 seconds to open that door and walk out with your hands up. After that, we come in and you don't walk out at all." Silence. Then a voice, muffled by the thick door. "You come through this door, the kids die first. That's our insurance." Ruggiero gestured to Marco, who moved to the door's hinges, examining them with practiced eyes. Industrial strength, but old. The factory had been closed for 3 years. 3 years of rust and neglect. "Your insurance is worthless," Ruggiero called back. "Because if those children die, so do you. Not quick, not clean. I will personally ensure that your last hours on Earth are so painful that you'll beg me to end it. Is it the insurance you want?" A different voice now, younger, more frightened. "We're just following orders." Corelli said, "Corelli isn't here. I am, and I'm offering you a choice. Walk out now. Hands up, weapons down, you live to see trial. Stay in there, you die in that room. It's simple mathematics." Marco had positioned a small-shaped charge on the hinges, working with the speed of someone who'd breached 100 doors. He looked at Ruggiero and nodded once. 5 seconds, Ruggiero called out. 4, 3, the door opened. 2 men emerged, hands raised, weapons left behind. Their faces were pale, sweat-soaked, the expressions of people who just realized they were on the wrong side of history. Paolo's team secured them immediately, zip ties and frisking, efficient and professional. The third guard stayed inside. Through the open door, Ruggiero could see him standing near the back wall. And huddled in the corner, bound and blindfolded but alive for small figures. "Drop the weapon," Ruggiero said quietly, stepping through the doorway. The guard was older than the others, maybe 40, with prison tattoos on his neck and the dead eyes of someone who'd long ago stopped caring about consequences. His gun was pointed not at Ruggiero, but at the children. "I drop this, I'm dead anyway. Corelli doesn't forgive failure. Maybe, but at least you'll die quick. Clean. 1 bullet, lights out. Better than what happens if you pull that trigger. Better than what I'll do if even one of these children gets hurt because you made the wrong choice." The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. 4, 5. Then the guard's hand wavered. The gun lowered slightly. Marco moved like striking snake, crossing the distance in 2 steps, his own weapon pressed against the guard's temple before the man could react. The gun clattered to the floor. Marco kicked it away and forced the guard to his knees. "Secure him," Ruggiero ordered, already moving toward the children. Maya Washington, 9 years old, dark curls matted with sweat, blindfold soaked with tears. He removed it gently, and she blinked in the light, her eyes taking a moment to focus. When they did, when she saw his face, she started crying harder. "It's okay," Ruggiero said quietly, working on the zip ties binding her wrists. "You're safe now. We're taking you home. My mom is waiting for you. I promise." Isaac Goldstein, 8 years old, glasses broken, 1 lens missing. He was shaking so hard he could barely stand when Ruggiero freed him. "I want my mom. Please. I want my mom. Soon. Very soon." The Hernandez twins, Rosa and Maria, 11 years old, clutching each other even in their restraints. When Ruggiero removed their blindfolds, they looked at him with identical expressions of disbelief and desperate hope. "Are you real?" one of them whispered. "Or are we dreaming?" "I'm real, and you're going home." The medical teams, ambulances staged 2 blocks away, moved in within minutes. Detective Torres arrived with them, her face tight with professional neutrality that didn't quite hide her relief. All 4 alive. All 4 alive. Dehydrated, traumatized, but breathing. The suspects. 3 dead. 3 in custody. Ruggiero holstered his weapon. "They're yours now, Angela. Make sure the charges stick." "Oh, they'll stick. Kidnapping, child endangerment, attempted murder. Corelli's going down for this. She looked at him with something that might have been respect. You did good today, Bellucci. Today isn't over yet. The children were taken to the hospital, reunited with their sobbing mothers in scenes that would be replayed on every news channel by evening. Maya Washington's mother collapsed when she saw her daughter, holding her so tight the paramedics had to gently remind her they needed to do an examination. Isaac's parents, both present despite their divorce, held their son between them and wept. The Hernandez twins' mother, still in her hospital scrubs from the night shift she'd been working when they were taken, kissed their faces over and over, whispering prayers in Spanish. Ruggiero watched from a distance, then quietly left. He had one more promise to keep. The next morning, Wednesday, 7:15 a.m., he arrived at the staff quarters to walk Tito to school. The boy was ready, backpack on, smile bright despite the dark circles under Aaliyah's eyes. She'd been awake all night watching the news, crying with relief for children she'd never met, children who were alive because her son had been brave. Ready? Ruggiero asked. Ready, Tito confirmed. They walked to the front gate together, and Ruggiero saw immediately that something had changed. People were waiting. Not his security team, though Paolo and Marco were there, but others. Parents from the neighborhood, shopkeepers, a crossing guard, the grandmother who'd walked into his gambling house demanding action, Jean Park from the laundromat, Carmen Rodriguez, the office cleaner, Robert Chun, the security guard, and more, dozens more, people who'd spent their lives being invisible, who'd learned that speaking up only brought trouble. They weren't invisible anymore. Mrs. Patterson from the PDA stood among them, her daughter Maya holding her hand, Mr. and Mrs. Goldstein with Isaac between them. The Hernandez family, all 5 of them, the twins holding their younger brother. Families who 24 hours ago had been shattered by fear and grief. They were whole again. Mr. Bellucci, Mrs. Patterson said, stepping forward. Her voice carried none of yesterday's judgment, only gratitude. We want to walk with you this morning, if that's all right. Ruggiero looked at the crowd, at these people who'd found their courage in the space between silence and speech, at this community that had decided protection wasn't just for the powerful. It's more than all right, he said quietly. It's exactly right. They walked together, all of them, down the 7 blocks to Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary. Ruggiero held Tito's hand. Mrs. Patterson walked beside them with Maya. The Goldsteins and the Hernandez family joined in. Jean Park, Carmen Rodriguez, Robert Chun, parents and children, shop owners and security guards, the visible and the formerly invisible, moving together through the morning streets. People stopped to watch. Phones came out, but this time they weren't recording a mafia boss making threats. They were recording a neighborhood that had remembered what community meant, what protection looked like when everyone participated, what happened when the silent found their voices. At the school gates, Principal Richardson was waiting. He looked different somehow, standing straighter, his expression less bureaucratic and more human. Mr. Bellucci, he said formally, I've been in contact with the school board. They've approved your security assessment. We'd like to schedule it for this week. Good. My people will be in touch. Richardson knelt beside Tito, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. Tito, I owe you an apology. Your mother came to me 3 weeks ago, frightened for your safety, and I told her to follow protocol. I should have listened better. I should have done more. He looked up at the crowd of parents. All of you deserve better. The children in this school deserve better. That changes now. I give you my word. He stood and extended his hand to Ruggiero. After a moment, Ruggiero shook it. Not friendship, not exactly, but acknowledgement. Recognition that sometimes even the systems that failed could choose to change. Tito hugged Ruggiero's leg quickly, then ran toward the school, joining the stream of children heading to class. Normal again. Safe again. The way childhood was supposed to be. Ruggiero turned to address the crowd. Thank you for walking with us this morning. Thank you for speaking up yesterday. Thank you for reminding me that protection isn't something one person does alone. It's something a community builds together. Jean Park stepped forward, the elderly laundromat owner who'd made the first call. Mr. Bellucci, you said children in this neighborhood are under your protection. Does that include all neighborhoods? My daughter, she works in Riverside. Her son goes to school there. If something happens, all neighborhoods, Ruggiero said firmly. This isn't just about one school or one street. This is about drawing a line across the entire city. Children are off limits. Anyone who crosses that line answers to me. And he gestured to the crowd, to all of you, because you proved yesterday that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose courage over silence. Carmen Rodriguez spoke up, her voice stronger than yesterday's frightened whisper. We want to help, not just report information. We want to be part of this, to watch over each other's children the way our mothers and grandmothers used to build something that lasts longer than one rescue. Ruggiero considered this, an organization, not criminal, but protective, not his empire, but something parallel, a network of ordinary people choosing to see, choosing to speak, choosing to act. Then we build it, he said, a foundation for child safety, funded by my businesses, organized by this community. We train parents in awareness, install security cameras, create safe routes to school, establish emergency protocols that actually work. He looked at Robert Shun. We hire people who want to protect, rather than just collect paychecks. We make it impossible for predators to operate in our city. The crowd murmured agreement, voices rising in excitement and purpose. But understand this, Ruggiero continued, his tone hardening. Corelli is still out there. This war isn't over. He lost yesterday, but he won't accept that loss quietly. He'll retaliate. He'll test us, and we need to be ready. Let him come, said the grandmother who demanded action. We found our voices yesterday. We're not losing them today. Ruggiero smiled, a rare expression that transformed his face from threatening to almost warm. Then we understand each other. This is the new law. Children are protected. Communities watch over their own. And anyone who threatens the innocent faces not just my organization, but all of you. That's power that Corelli can't match. That's power no criminal enterprise can overcome. He checked his watch. 7:45. I need to get to work. Real work this time, rebuilding what I shut down yesterday. But tomorrow morning, same time, same place. We walk together again. And the day after that. And every day until every parent in this city feels safe letting their children walk to school. The crowd dispersed slowly, parents heading to work, shopkeepers to their stores, Ruggiero to his car. But something had changed in the way they moved, the way they looked at each other and at him. Yesterday, they'd been isolated individuals, vulnerable and afraid. Today, they were a community, connected, protected, strong. Paolo opened the Mercedes door, and Ruggiero slid into the back seat. As they pulled away from the school, he looked back one last time. Children playing in the schoolyard, parents watching from a fence, a crossing guard directing traffic. The ordinary miracle of a Wednesday morning. Safe. For now. His phone buzzed. A text from Salvatore. Your mother will be proud. Hell, I'm proud. You built something today that's worth more than the empire. Don't lose it. Ruggiero pocketed the phone and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. For children were home. A neighborhood had awakened. A community had formed. And somewhere in the city, Antonio Corelli was learning that some wars couldn't be won with violence alone. The rules had changed, and the innocent finally had someone watching over them. Not just a mafia boss with tattoos and a violent past, but an entire community that had decided silence wasn't safety anymore. That protection required participation. That sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply refuse to look away. That was the new law, and it was written in the courage of a 7-year-old boy who'd asked a monster for help, and discovered the monster was human after all.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.